Stability is supposed to mean safety. Routine is supposed to calm us. And the person who keeps everything in order is usually the one we trust the most. The stepfather takes those assumptions and quietly turns them into a threat. This is not a film about chaos breaking into a home. It's about order being enforced inside it. Nothing here feels out of control. The house is clean, the rules are clear. The man in charge is calm, polite, and absolutely certain about how a family should function. That certainty is where the danger begins. Unlike most horror films of its era, the stepfather doesn't frame evil as something obvious or unstable. Its central figure doesn't act out of anger or impulse. He corrects. He evaluates. And when reality no longer matches the image in his head, he doesn't argue, he replaces it. A new identity, a new household. The same expectations repeated again. What makes the film so unsettling is not what it shows, but what it normalizes. Authority without empathy, control without conflict, violence that feels less like an explosion and more like a conclusion. The story suggests that the most dangerous situations aren't the ones that feel unsafe, they're the ones that feel right for far too long. When The Stepfather was released, it was often overlooked. It didn't shock audiences. It didn't compete with louder horrors. But time revealed something uncomfortable. The film wasn't exaggerated. It was precise. Its fears didn't age, they waited. Because this isn't a story about strangers. It's a story about trust and what happens when certainty goes unquestioned. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Stepfather and why its quiet horror is still disturbingly relevant today. 1. The disturbing foundation of this film doesn't come from imagination. It comes from the realization that real life once produced a story just as calculated, just as quiet, and just as easy to overlook. Long before The Stepfather reached the screen, America had already witnessed how a man could erase his entire domestic life and step into a new one without raising suspicion. What made this real-world inspiration unsettling wasn't brutality alone, but intent. The act wasn't driven by panic or desperation. It was driven by dissatisfaction. When the family he had constructed no longer fit the image he demanded, he didn't try to repair it. He replaced it. The household wasn't a relationship, it was a system that had failed inspection. The film adopts this logic with chilling restraint. There is no attempt to sensationalize its origins, no declarations of truth, no insistence on realism. Instead, the story unfolds through repetition. Identity is discarded. Domestic roles are reassigned. The behavior remains constant. This pattern becomes the film's true subject. By refusing to foreground its real-life roots, the film mirrors how such cases exist in reality. They don't announce themselves. They blend in. They rely on the assumption that stability equals safety, that a quiet household means nothing is wrong. The most unsettling implication is not that such a thing could happen once, but that it could happen repeatedly. That reinvention, when paired with trust and normalcy, can become a form of camouflage. And when horror looks indistinguishable from order, it rarely draws attention until it's too late. 2. One of the film's most unsettling choices is how it positions its central figure morally, not as someone acting out of hatred, but as someone acting with purpose. He doesn't view himself as destructive. He views himself as corrective. That distinction defines everything about his behavior. Unlike many cinematic killers, he isn't fueled by chaos or emotional collapse. His actions are measured, evaluated, justified within his own internal framework. In his mind, a family has rules, roles, and expectations. When those expectations are violated, the solution isn't compromise, it's replacement. The film reinforces this mindset through restraint. There are no emotional outbursts to signal danger, no confessions to explain motivation. The character's calm becomes its own warning sign. Violence, when it arrives, feels procedural, the final step in a logical sequence, rather than an impulsive act. This forces the audience into an uncomfortable realization. The character isn't rejecting social values. he's enforcing a distorted version of them. Discipline, authority, order. Traits often praised when they remain subtle. The film simply asks what happens when those traits become absolute. By stripping away emotional justification, the story presents evil as something that can feel rational from the inside. Not wild, not unpredictable, just necessary. And that perspective is far more unsettling than any display of uncontrolled rage. 3. The film's power depends heavily on its refusal to visually signal danger. Nothing looks threatening. The neighborhoods are familiar. The interiors are clean and well lit. The spaces feel intentionally safe. This isn't coincidence, it's strategy. By grounding the story in recognizable domestic settings, the film removes the comfort of distance. There is no haunted location, no ominous environment to warn the audience. The danger exists within spaces designed to feel protective. Kitchens, living rooms, dinner tables. Tension emerges through observation rather than shock. Viewers begin to notice repetition before characters do. Controlled behavior, conditional affection, small corrections that carry disproportionate weight. The threat doesn't intrude, it integrates. This choice reflects a deeper anxiety about how harm can exist without disruption. The film suggests that danger doesn't always break routines. Sometimes it depends on them. Normalcy becomes a shield discouraging suspicion and delaying intervention. What makes this approach especially unsettling is how little resistance the environment offers. Social structures reward politeness. Authority figures hesitate. Neighbors assume stability. The system doesn't question him, it protects him. By the time violence occurs, it doesn't feel sudden. It feels inevitable, like the final step in a process that has been unfolding quietly all along. And that realization lingers far longer than any single moment of horror ever could. 4. One of the film's most unsettling observations is how politeness becomes a form of camouflage. The central figure doesn't rely on intimidation to establish control. He relies on manners, calm speech, predictable behavior. In social settings, these traits don't raise alarms, they lower them. The film quietly exposes an uncomfortable truth about trust. People are trained to associate composure with reliability. Someone who appears organized and respectful is rarely questioned, especially in domestic spaces. The character understands this instinctively. He doesn't need to hide his authority. He performs it flawlessly. This creates a dangerous inversion. The more correctly he behaves, the less likely anyone is to intervene. Suspicion feels inappropriate. Doubt feels impolite. The film shows how social rules designed to maintain harmony can instead shield harmful behavior. What makes this dynamic disturbing is how familiar it feels. The audience recognizes how easily concerns could be dismissed in real life. There are no obvious violations, no dramatic threats, just a growing sense that something is off and no socially acceptable way to address it. Authority in the film isn't seized, it's handed over. Small decisions accumulate, allowances are made, boundaries shift quietly. By the time the danger becomes visible, the structure supporting it is already in place. The horror lies not in deception, but in fluency. Evil doesn't break the rules here, it understands them better than anyone else. And when politeness becomes protection, harm doesn't need secrecy. It only needs time. 5. The film's deliberate pacing is often mistaken for restraint, but it functions more like pressure. Scenes are allowed to breathe. Conversations linger. Silence stretches longer than expected. This slowness isn't passive, it's calculated. By refusing rapid escalation, the film traps the audience inside unease rather than releasing it through shock. There are no quick payoffs, no moments of relief. Discomfort accumulates gradually, mirroring how control establishes itself over time. This pacing also reflects the internal logic of the central character. Nothing he does is rushed. Everything is evaluated, planned, corrected. The film doesn't simply depict his mindset, it adopts it. Structure becomes character. When moments of violence finally occur, they feel disruptive not because they're graphic, but because they violate the established rhythm. The calm fractures. Order collapses. The contrast makes these moments feel wrong on a structural level, not just a moral one. Unlike films that exhaust viewers through intensity, this one unsettles through patience. Fear comes from waiting, from watching patterns repeat without interruption, from recognizing inevitability without knowing when it will surface. The result is lingering discomfort rather than adrenaline. The film doesn't overwhelm the audience, it confines them. And that quiet confinement proves far more difficult to shake than any sudden scare ever could. 6. Perhaps the most chilling concept in the film is how family is treated as a functional unit rather than an emotional bond. Relationships aren't nurtured, they're evaluated. Each member is expected to fulfill a role, and failure isn't met with discussion, it's met with replacement. The character doesn't grieve what he destroys, he resets. That absence of attachment is what makes him truly unsettling. A family that doesn't meet expectations isn't tragic in his eyes. It's defective. This worldview reframes identity as something interchangeable. Names, histories, and emotional ties hold no intrinsic value. What matters is performance, obedience, alignment with structure. Love becomes conditional. Belonging becomes transactional. The film never articulates this philosophy directly. Instead, it allows repetition to reveal it. New households follow the same pattern, the same rules, the same quiet evaluations. Identity isn't discovered, it's imposed. This taps into a deeper fear about unchecked authority within domestic spaces. When power is absolute and expectations are rigid, individuality becomes a liability. Deviations aren't tolerated. They're erased. By stripping family of its emotional safety, the film transforms it into something mechanical. And in doing so, it delivers one of its most disturbing insights. The greatest threat to intimacy isn't chaos, it's control perfected. 7. A quiet but powerful mechanism in the film is how attention itself becomes a method of control. The central figure is always watching, always measuring. Conversations aren't exchanges, they're assessments. Reactions are noted. Tone is evaluated. Nothing is neutral. Everything counts. This constant scrutiny creates an atmosphere where approval feels conditional. Family members don't know the standards they're being judged by, only that those standards exist. Affection is temporary. Acceptance is earned. The film never explains these rules outright, but it doesn't need to. The pressure is visible in the way small moments suddenly feel heavy. What makes this disturbing is how familiar the process feels. Observation doesn't look like aggression. It looks like concern, like responsibility, like leadership. The character's watchfulness blends easily into accepted ideas of authority, making it difficult to distinguish care from control. The film subtly aligns the audience with this gaze. Viewers begin noticing the same details he notices. A shift in tone, a challenge to routine, a sign of independence. This shared focus creates discomfort as attention itself becomes invasive. By framing surveillance as interpersonal rather than technological, the film exposes how control can operate without force or tools. It only requires proximity, authority, and silence. No threats, no punishment at first, just evaluation. The horror lies in how invisible this power becomes. When being watched feels normal, resistance feels unnecessary. And by the time attention turns into enforcement, the structure supporting it is already firmly in place. 8. One of the film's most unsettling decisions is its refusal to explain the character's psychology. There are no flashbacks to justify behavior, no trauma offered as context, no diagnosis to frame the threat. The film denies the audience the comfort of understanding. This absence is deliberate. Explanation creates distance. If viewers can label the problem, they can contain it. The film refuses that closure. Instead, it presents behavior without origin, pattern without excuse. The character exists as an action, not a case study. This choice mirrors real discomfort. Harm rarely comes with explanations. Control doesn't arrive with a manual. Victims are often left interpreting behavior without clarity or confirmation. The film captures that uncertainty by withholding answers entirely. The lack of backstory also reinforces the film's central theme: identity is irrelevant. The past doesn't matter because the role is all that counts. The character doesn't need history, he needs structure. Motivation is replaced by function. By refusing to tell the audience why this person behaves the way he does, the film makes a more unsettling point. Sometimes the pattern is the explanation. Sometimes searching for deeper meaning only distracts from what's happening right now. The result is a threat that feels closer, not further away. Because without explanation, there's no safe distance. Only behavior consistent, controlled, and deeply unsettling. 9. From early on, the film establishes a sense of inevitability. Not through foreshadowing or dramatic tension, but through rigidity. The character's internal logic allows no flexibility, no compromise. Once expectations are violated, the outcome is already decided. This inevitability develops quietly. There's no countdown, no clear turning point. The film simply lets the structure run. Each interaction narrows possibilities. Each correction tightens the frame. The audience senses the end long before it arrives. What makes this especially disturbing is how rational it appears from the inside. The character isn't reacting emotionally. He's following a system, and systems don't negotiate, they execute. When something fails, it's removed. This mirrors real patterns of control where harm becomes unavoidable, not because of escalation, but because of inflexibility. The warning signs exist, but they don't announce themselves loudly enough to provoke action. They accumulate. By the time violence occurs, it doesn't feel surprising. It feels like confirmation. Proof that the structure was never designed to accommodate difference, only compliance. The film's true tension lies in this realization. That the danger wasn't hidden or sudden. It was consistent. And once consistency hardens into structure, the ending is no longer a question. It's a conclusion. 10. The film reveals how authority often arrives without confrontation. The central figure doesn't demand control. He occupies it. He speaks with certainty, acts decisively, and moves as if permission has already been granted. In domestic spaces, that confidence is rarely challenged. It feels natural, familiar, appropriate. This quiet transfer of power is what makes the situation so dangerous. Authority isn't imposed through fear or violence. It's accepted through convenience. Someone else is taking responsibility, making decisions, keeping things orderly. The film shows how quickly that relief turns into dependency. What's unsettling is how little effort this requires. Small corrections go unchallenged. Preferences become rules. Expectations harden into standards. None of these steps feel extreme on their own, but together, they create an imbalance that's difficult to reverse. The character interprets authority as ownership. Once he occupies the role of head of the household, it becomes absolute. Disagreement isn't a discussion, it's defiance. The film never dramatizes this shift. It lets it happen quietly, reflecting how power often settles unnoticed. By framing authority as something people hand over rather than resist, the film shifts responsibility outward. The threat doesn't succeed because it's aggressive. It succeeds because the environment accommodates it. In the end, the film suggests that the most dangerous authority isn't loud or visible. It's the kind that feels reasonable. The kind no one thinks to question until it's already complete. 7. Repetition plays a critical role in how the film builds dread. Conversations echo each other. Domestic routines recur. Similar moments unfold across different households with only minor variations. This isn't narrative economy, it's design. By repeating patterns, the film removes the comfort of uniqueness. This isn't a one-time breakdown. It's a system refined through repetition. Each household follows the same blueprint. Each failure leads to the same response. Replacement. As these cycles repeat, emotion drains from the acts themselves. What might initially shock begins to feel procedural. The audience isn't meant to feel surprise, they're meant to feel entrapment. The realization that nothing learned will change the outcome. This structure mirrors real dynamics of control, where harm often stabilizes rather than escalates. The absence of change becomes the warning sign. The film doesn't offer progress or resolution. It offers persistence. By denying narrative growth, the story creates a claustrophobic effect. There's no evolution, only refinement. The character doesn't learn, he perfects. And that perfection makes intervention feel increasingly futile. The repetition also implicates the viewer. Each cycle invites the question of why nothing stops it. The answer isn't hidden. It's embedded in normalcy. When behavior becomes routine, it stops attracting attention. The horror then isn't in the repetition itself. It's in how easily repetition becomes invisible. 12. Perhaps the film's most unsettling effect is how it positions the audience alongside the unfolding threat. Viewers are not given privileged insight or early warnings. They experience the same gradual realization as the characters, the same uncertainty, the same hesitation. This alignment creates moral tension. At what point does discomfort become danger? When should concern turn into action? The film never provides a clear answer. Instead, it shows the cost of waiting too long. As the story progresses, moments of possible intervention appear and pass. Each delay feels reasonable. Each doubt feels justified. The film captures how caution can slowly transform into complicity without intention. By the time the truth becomes undeniable, the opportunity to prevent harm has already slipped away. The audience feels that loss not as shock, but as regret. The realization that recognition came too late. This effect lingers because it extends beyond the screen. The film doesn't ask viewers to identify villains. It asks them to examine thresholds, how much certainty is required before action feels justified. By implicating the audience in this hesitation, the film delivers its most enduring discomfort. The horror isn't what happens. It's the realization that it was allowed to happen. 13. One of the film's most unsettling ideas is how identity is treated as temporary. Names change, histories disappear, personal details are erased without hesitation. The central figure doesn't search for who he is, he selects what works. Identity in this world isn't discovered through experience. It's assembled through function. This approach strips identity of its emotional weight. The past doesn't anchor him. Memory doesn't restrain him. Everything that once defined a person becomes optional. What matters is whether the current role fits the structure he demands. If it doesn't, the role is replaced. The film presents this fluidity quietly, without spectacle. Reinvention doesn't require drama. It requires distance and opportunity. New environments provide clean slates. New relationships offer fresh roles. The process feels disturbingly efficient. What makes this idea so unsettling is how familiar it feels. Modern life already allows for reinvention. People move, change careers, rebuild identities. The film simply pushes that flexibility to an extreme, revealing how dangerous it can become when paired with absolute control. By treating identity as modular, the film undermines the assumption that time guarantees authenticity. Knowing someone longer doesn't necessarily mean knowing them better. Consistency can be performed. Stability can be staged. This reframing leaves the audience with a chilling realization. The threat doesn't lie in losing oneself. It lies in being able to discard oneself without consequence. When identity becomes interchangeable, accountability dissolves. The film never explicitly states this philosophy, but it permeates every transition. The absence of attachment isn't portrayed as emptiness. It's portrayed as efficiency. And that efficiency makes the character far more unsettling than someone driven by chaos ever could be. 14. The film offers a subtle but sharp critique of traditional authority by showing how easily it becomes absolute. The central character embodies traits commonly associated with leadership: decisiveness, emotional restraint, discipline, and control. On the surface, these qualities appear responsible, even admirable. But the film exposes what happens when those traits are no longer balanced by empathy. Authority shifts from guidance to domination. Structure becomes rigidity. Order becomes intolerance. The character doesn't reject cultural expectations, he fulfills them too precisely. This exaggeration is what makes the critique effective. The danger doesn't come from breaking norms. It comes from enforcing them without flexibility. The film suggests that authority becomes destructive when it leaves no room for difference. What's unsettling is how invisible this shift can be. Each correction feels justified. Each rule feels reasonable. Only over time does the accumulation become oppressive. By then, authority has already solidified. The film never delivers this critique through dialogue. It allows behavior to speak for itself. The audience is left to recognize how easily strength can be mistaken for control and control for care. By embedding its horror within familiar power dynamics, the film avoids moral distance. Viewers aren't watching an alien form of domination. They're watching an intensified version of something recognizable. The implication is uncomfortable. When authority is defined by certainty rather than responsibility, it becomes brittle. And when that certainty goes unquestioned, it transforms from leadership into threat. 15. One of the film's most disturbing achievements is how completely danger blends into routine. There is no single moment where everything clearly collapses. Instead, tension accumulates through repetition, silence, and gradual correction. Harm doesn't arrive suddenly, it settles in. The film mirrors how control often establishes itself in real life. It doesn't disrupt schedules, it organizes them. It doesn't create chaos, it eliminates it. Over time, behavior that once felt uncomfortable begins to feel expected. This normalization is what makes intervention so difficult. When nothing appears urgent, concern feels premature. The film shows how the absence of dramatic warning signs becomes a warning sign in itself. By the time violence surfaces, it feels less like a turning point and more like a confirmation. Proof that the system was never designed to allow deviation, only compliance. The story doesn't ask whether the outcome could have been avoided. It suggests that once routines harden into structure, reversal becomes nearly impossible. The damage is done long before it becomes visible. This realization lingers because it reframes fear. Safety isn't lost through sudden danger. It erodes through familiarity, through repeated acceptance, through silence mistaken for stability. The film leaves viewers with a quiet discomfort, the sense that the most threatening situations aren't the ones that feel unsafe. They're the ones that feel normal for far too long. 16. One reason the film feels disturbingly believable is how clearly it exposes society's blind spots. The danger here doesn't survive because people are reckless. It survives because people are cautious. They avoid assumptions. They respect privacy. They wait for certainty. And in doing so, they create space for harm to operate undetected. The film shows how suspicion is often socially discouraged. Questioning someone's behavior feels intrusive. Doubting a figure of authority feels inappropriate. The central character relies on this hesitation. He understands that politeness and restraint are powerful deterrents against intervention. What makes this unsettling is how little effort it takes to maintain that protection. No manipulation is required. No lies need to be elaborate. All that's needed is consistency. Calm behavior reassures others that nothing is wrong even when unease quietly grows. The story highlights a structural flaw. Systems designed to prevent harm depend on clarity evidence and escalation. But the threat in this film is subtle. It doesn't escalate quickly. It doesn't announce itself. It blends into acceptable behavior. As doubts accumulate, they're never strong enough on their own to justify action. Each moment of hesitation feels reasonable. Each delay feels responsible. The film captures how these small pauses combine into collective inaction. By the time certainty arrives, it arrives too late. The opportunity to intervene has already passed. The film doesn't frame this as moral failure, but as structural vulnerability. A reminder that danger doesn't always defeat safeguards. Sometimes it simply fits between them. 17. The film's restrained visual style plays a crucial role in sustaining its psychological unease. There are no exaggerated shadows, no stylized camera movements, no obvious visual warnings. Everything looks balanced, ordinary, and controlled. The absence of visual threat becomes the threat itself. By keeping lighting natural and composition stable, the film refuses to guide emotional responses. Viewers aren't told when to feel afraid. They're forced to observe behavior instead of relying on atmosphere. Discomfort emerges gradually, without instruction. This restraint mirrors the central character's worldview. Order is everything. Chaos has been eliminated. The environment reflects his desire for balance and control, reinforcing the illusion that nothing is wrong. The visuals become an extension of his authority. What's unsettling is how this neutrality disarms the audience. Without cinematic cues, danger feels ambiguous. Fear becomes uncertain. The film places responsibility on viewers to recognize patterns rather than react to signals. This approach deepens engagement. Horror isn't delivered, it's discovered. Each realization feels personal, earned through attention rather than imposed through spectacle. The unease feels internal rather than external. By rejecting stylistic excess, the film suggests a disturbing idea. The most dangerous situations don't look dangerous. They look functional. They look calm. They look complete. And when everything appears stable, vigilance feels unnecessary. The film quietly warns that this is precisely when awareness matters most. 18. Perhaps the film's most unsettling choice is its refusal to provide emotional closure. Even as the immediate conflict resolves, the underlying system remains intact. The story ends, but the pattern feels unfinished. This lingering discomfort comes from how the character is defined. He isn't tied to a single identity, location, or moment. He's defined by repetition. As long as reinvention is possible, the cycle can continue. The film never presents him as a unique anomaly. It presents him as a process. That implication shifts the horror from personal to systemic. Removing one threat doesn't dismantle the conditions that allowed it to exist. Trust, authority, and normalcy remain vulnerable to manipulation. The film resists reassurance. There's no sense that balance has been fully restored, only that this iteration has been interrupted. The audience is left with uncertainty rather than relief. By avoiding definitive resolution, the story challenges the expectation that danger can be neatly contained. It suggests that some threats aren't eliminated, they're paused. And when the pause ends, the pattern resumes. This ending reframes the entire experience. The fear doesn't come from what happened, but from what could happen again. The realization that the system still exists unchanged. The film's final effect isn't panic. It's awareness. A quiet recognition that the most unsettling stories don't conclude with answers. They conclude with questions and the responsibility to keep asking them. 19. The film's reputation wasn't built on immediate impact, but on delayed recognition. When it first appeared, it felt understated compared to the louder horror titles surrounding it. There were no grand set pieces, no sensational shocks designed to dominate conversation. As a result, it was easy to overlook. Over time, that restraint became its defining strength. Viewers returning to the film years later began to notice what had once been missed: the precision, the confidence in what the film chose not to show. What initially seemed modest revealed itself as intentional. This shift in perception reflects a broader pattern in how psychological horror ages. Stories rooted in behavior rather than spectacle tend to gain relevance as social contexts change. The fears explored here weren't tied to trends. They were tied to systems, authority, trust, domestic power elements that persist long after styles fade. As public conversations around hidden violence and control evolved, the film's themes began to feel less theoretical. What once seemed extreme started to resemble recognizable dynamics. The story didn't become more frightening with time. It became clearer. The film's cult status emerged not through rediscovery, but through reinterpretation. Audiences didn't suddenly notice it, they finally understood it. The unease it generated wasn't accidental. It was delayed. That delayed recognition is perhaps its most unsettling achievement. The film didn't fail to connect. It waited. And when the world caught up, its quiet horror no longer felt abstract. It felt accurate. 20. The film's most enduring impact lies in how it dismantles conventional ideas of safety. Traditionally, horror draws clear boundaries between threat and refuge. This story erases that distinction. The home offers no protection. Routine offers no warning. Authority offers no reassurance. Instead of portraying danger as an intrusion, the film presents it as an accommodation. Violence doesn't break the system, it completes it. The structures meant to create stability quietly enable harm rather than prevent it. This inversion forces viewers to reconsider how safety is defined. Not as something actively protected, but as something assumed. The film suggests that the greatest vulnerability lies in certainty, the belief that familiar roles and orderly behavior guarantee security. By the end, the audience isn't left fearing a specific individual. They're left questioning a framework. How easily trust is extended, how rarely authority is examined, how often normalcy is mistaken for safety. The story doesn't offer comfort or resolution. It offers awareness. The realization that danger doesn't always look like disruption. Sometimes it looks like routine done too well. That awareness lingers because it can't be dismissed as fiction. The film doesn't warn against strangers or monsters. It warns against unquestioned structures. And when everything appears to be in order, the film leaves one final unsettling suggestion that may be the moment when vigilance matters most. What truly lingers after the film ends isn't a specific act or scene, but a quiet discomfort about how easily danger can coexist with trust. The story never argues that people are naive. It suggests something more unsettling, that trust itself is a structural necessity, and that necessity can be exploited. The film exposes how safety is often built on assumption rather than verification. We trust routines because questioning them is exhausting. We trust authority because constant doubt disrupts stability. The central character doesn't need to deceive these instincts. He aligns with them. He understands that appearing dependable is more effective than appearing intimidating. What makes this especially disturbing is how little resistance the system offers. There is no moment where everything clearly goes wrong. There is only a series of small acceptances, each one reasonable, each one harmless on its own. Together they form a structure that protects control rather than challenges it. The film refuses to provide a solution to this problem. It doesn't suggest that suspicion should replace trust or that vigilance should override connection. Instead, it leaves viewers with uncertainty, the understanding that certainty itself can be dangerous when it goes unexamined. This is why the film continues to feel relevant. Not because it depicts extreme behavior, but because it reveals how ordinary mechanisms can quietly enable it. The horror isn't hidden behind secrets or lies. It's embedded in familiarity. By ending on this unresolved tension, the film shifts responsibility outward. The threat isn't confined to the screen. It exists wherever routine replaces attention and authority goes unquestioned. And perhaps that's the most unsettling realization of all: safety isn't something we inherit. It's something that requires constant awareness, even when everything appears perfectly in order. The stepfather doesn't leave us with a monster to defeat. It leaves us with a question to sit with. If danger can exist without breaking rules, then how much of what we call safety is simply assumption? Which of these facts change the way you look at authority, routine, or trust inside everyday life? Do you think this story is about an individual failure or about a system that quietly allows control to grow unchecked? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want more deep dives into films that hide their most disturbing truths in plain sight, like the video, subscribe, and tell us which movie we should uncover next.